all of your biometric data, your location, your privacy, it is gone. If you took the vaccine, you are the router. You are a communication device.
Jesse Beltran is a TSCM certified investigator, one of the nation's leading specialists in anomalous frequency analysis and Havana syndrome related phenomenon for over 20 years. Of course, this has led him to the COVID vaccine, and Jesse joins us now. Thank you so much for being here, Jesse. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Clayton, and thank you for the opportunity. It's important that we disseminate this information to basically the general population, because normally I deal with people who are symptomatic and having complaints. And recently, within our research, and you just touched a little bit upon it, we're finding that even those who are not symptomatic post-jab are now coming up positive in where we detect anomalous RF signals and or nonlinear junction semiconductor materials in these very specific focal areas around the human body.
And we have some video here of your team, you specifically looking at and examining the human body. Here's one individual where you have some sort of a device on someone's head. This person obviously still alive. But what are you seeing? Like what is actually happening when you're holding up this transmitter to the human head and different parts of the body?
Yeah, what I'm actually, there's two devices. One is an RF detector. It's a general frequency detector where we'll scan the human person and see if we get a detection. The manufacturer has this, the accuracy down to one millionth of a millimeter as far as accuracy. So we can attenuate it down because we live in a wireless society, so that we have to be really, really close to an emission. Then the other device that you saw in the documentary is a nonlinear junction detector. These things are highly sensitive, very expensive. This piece of equipment here is around $22,000 US. And what it was designed to do is to find rust initially in airplanes. And what they found serendipitously is that it will also locate circuitry or semiconductor material, silicon-based, which is basically in all circuitry, down to very, very minute sizes. And what we were doing is doing RF scanning around those victims who were symptomatic initially, and then coming with a nonlinear junction detection because we felt our hypothesis was those who were suffering from the Havana syndrome or anomalous health incidences is the new acronym, that there was something unique within that person that was allowing them to receive these signals. And what the nonlinear junction detection was detecting is positive results for semiconductor materials or semiconductors in these people, which ultimately led to surgical removal of biosensors. One of my earliest cases is the Bonnie Kellerby case.
This man and this woman here are now my family. And without John supporting Bonnie through this, remember, he thought she was crazy. But we were able to show proof on this journey that she wasn't. Okay?
He did.
And think about their relationship. This can happen to any one of you. Okay? And how would you feel if you let the love of your life go because someone synthetically induced mental illness? Thank you. Okay. You want to say anything? You want to say anything? Thank you, sweetie.
I just, this started 22 years ago for us. She was implanted 22 years ago. So that was very difficult. No. And it was very difficult. The 7 years before we met Jesse, it was hell, basically. Because I didn't trust what she was saying, didn't trust what she was acting. Take her to the hospital. They put her in 72-hour lockup because they say that, it's schizophrenia. That's what they use against you. It's not fair. It's a horrible thing. And we're lucky we made it through it today. So anyway, we got 3 inserts. We went through everything. I take her to wherever it's necessary to get help. And we've got some surgical removal. She's got 2 implants still that are very bad, that aren't released yet. We're hoping that this new doctor will help us to get them out. and then maybe we can have our life come back. But our life has not been normal. You know, we should be enjoying our retirement, but it's very difficult to do that when she's tortured 24/7 with voice and torment. It's a horrible thing. It's unbelievable, actually. So anyway, sorry, very emotional. Jesse, thank you.
They removed 3 biosensors out of her. And I asked this question to everyone out there. How many of you out there have someone in your family, a friend, or know of someone who has mental illness? And what if that mental illness was synthetically induced? Okay. How would you feel if this was done to a loved one, to you, or to a close friend? And the Bonnie Kellerby case really touches home on that. I was invited down in Santa Monica, California to do a presentation in front of Secretary of State's RFK's support group. They raised a lot of money for his campaign. And they asked me to do a presentation about this topic. And to my surprise, the Kellerbys showed up there. And so we showed and demonstrated these biosensors that were taken out of her. And she stood up, and Mr. Kellerby was a very proud man, stood up, and he expresses he almost lost the love of his life because he thought she was crazy. In fact, Dr. Call called me and said, Jesse, can you please give this couple a call? I know that Bonnie's telling the truth. Can you please talk to him? And I said, sure. So I gave him a call. And when we held our first meeting in Sacramento, California, when I was just trying to find out how many victims are truly out there, and I expected a handful, and when we disseminated it out to the community, I had 100 people show up. Mr. Kellerby was there, and everyone in that room, it was standing room only, had the very same complaints with very little deviation. And Mr. Kellerby stood up and he said, I almost lost the love of my life, but I can no longer discard her as being crazy because each and every one of you have expressed the same complaints as her. And he goes at that RFK presentation that I was at, and he said, we should be enjoying in retirement. You know, they're making individuals like my wife look like they're crazy and diagnosing them with schizophrenia, force institutionalizing them, force medicating them, and further re-victimizing them. Bonnie Kellerby never consented for those biosensors to be implanted in her body. Those were done non-consensually. And what may surprise you, if I asked you, is this legal to do in the United States? And I would come back and say, right now, it is currently absolutely legal to do to you without your consent. In 2016, President Obama instituted the 21st Century Cures Act. And it was sold to the American citizens as a way to fight the opioid epidemic, a crisis that we were having here in the United States. But hidden in it was a section called 3024. And in section 3024, the exact language is this: it is legal to experiment on U.S. citizens without their consent as long as it does not exceed minimal risk criteria. Then the question is, what is minimal risk criteria? Nothing that doesn't happen in normal everyday life. And I would ask this: does death happen in normal everyday life? And they're further protected. If you are in an IRB and if you do a FOIA request to see if you are in an experiment, it is protected under national security protocol, so that data cannot be shared with you. And in 2024, the Biden administration extended it to cover private entities, private research institutions, and universities.
So I'm sorry. If you go in for like a doctor's visit or someone's going to give you a shot, because Obama instituted this, they could inject you with something you don't even know about?
Absolutely. It's perfectly legal to do. And you might be surprised. Yes. I had a software engineer. Yeah. I have a software engineer who took his children to a dentist recently. And under the authorization, there is a section in there that their data will be shared with the federal government, law enforcement, NSA, and research institutions. Why does that need to be included? I thought it was absurd. I didn't believe them. Then I had another client who said, the NSA is collecting our data. I had to sign this. And they will allow me to show you redacted aspects of their signed forms. And it absolutely says that your data will be shared with the NSA. So
you
why
go to
is
the
this being
dentist.
done?
I'm sorry, like, I know that you live in this world, so this is probably normal to you, but take the kids to the dentist, you're just filling out your forms, your intake forms, just going to the dentist. You don't realize that the NSA, and this is not every dentist, but in certain situations, I guess, that your information, your child might be injected with something and the NSA is going to be watching it and you have no recourse.
It is absolutely legal if you're a U.S. citizen currently to experiment on this without consent. This is why we're out here educating the population. We have a URL called stop3024.com, and we're asking for everyone to sign that. We would have expected we'd have 1 million signatures by now, but we don't. But the reality is that this is happening right now before our very eyes. And we can go deep down the rabbit hole about what this technology does. Back in 1994, November of 1994, there was a 21st Century Cures Act. It was a declassified document that was obtained through a FOIA request. And on page 89, this is to keep the United States Air Force a superpower 50 years into the future. On page 89 is a chapter called Biological Processes of this report. And in it, it talks about using RF technology to remotely influence the human body, affecting our biochemistry, our thought processes. And in it, it says with this tech that they can erase memory sets and imprint memory sets. That means that they can take a copy of someone's memory sets that has a certain attribute that they want to institute in others, so they can imprint it in others with this tech. And they can erase memory sets. Now, people say, well, that sounds very sci-fi, but it's in there. You can read it. It's in black and white. Go back to 1972 in California. Our correctional institutions are notorious for experimenting on prisoners. We have another document from our United States Congress Senate that talks about modifying human behavior. And in 1972, at Vacaville Prison, not only then were they able to remotely monitor your biometrics, that means your respirations, your heart rate, your temperature, your blood pressure, but in the section, it also says remotely read your thoughts. So that was in 1972. Now, in 2013, there's a gentleman by the name of Dr. Ido Bachelet who gave a TED Med talk in Israel. And he's holding up a syringe. He says, I just brought this syringe from my lab, and just at the tip, not the full scale of the syringe, he says at the tip of this needle is 1,000 billion robots. Nano robots is what he was talking about. They're 50 nanometers in size. That's 2,000 times the width of a strain of a human hair. You can never see it. It would be invisible. But what these robots can do can self-replicate, they can self-assemble, they can cross the blood-brain barrier, they can attach to your DNA. And he teaches his students, and he's saying this in the presentation, how to control these things once they're in the host with an Xbox controller. That is what we're dealing with now. This is basically computer programming of nanoscale technology that we are now discovering that we know that in studies has shown that it has been in the Pfizer vaccine and the mRNA vaccine. It is also in the xylocaine derivatives. You can, in the demonstration that we sent you, you can see Dr. Ido Bachelet's nanorobots next to the xylocaine derivatives, and they're identical. You can look at what's in the studies that show what they were pulling out of the vaccines. You can see that they're identical. So the bottom line is, what can be done with this tech? If you're able to do these types of things, and what is meant to happen in the future for our society, our children to come, our genealogy, it is not a good picture if we don't stand up and say this is not okay, has never been okay, and that we've been hijacked, and this was done without our consent.
Maybe we can just, before we get more into the COVID vaccine piece of this and these detectable signals and what these things actually are, maybe you can wind the clock back a little bit here briefly and kind of walk us through the Havana syndrome piece of this and how you were first uncovering, because we've had people say, oh, it's just people being crazy. And we've had whistleblowers who've come forward and told us that they've gone through this. They've been targeted. We've had former members of the CIA telling us that they were specifically targeted with directed energy weapons, affecting their children, affecting their entire family. But maybe you can talk about the beginning, when you first discovered that there was something nefarious going on with Havana syndrome.
Okay, so Havana syndrome is a recent term. Okay, how I first became aware of this is this happened to someone who was close to me, my son's mother. I met a gentleman by the name of Dr. John Hall in San Antonio, Texas, back in 2010. He was the author of a book that he had just released called Satellite Terrorism in America. Coincidentally, he wrote that book based on the same phenomenon happening to his fiance. So when I met him, he was telling me how he was meeting U.S. citizens who were talking about hearing this strange signal that was being transmitted to them, followed by short-term, long-term memory loss, brain fog, severe headaches, vertigo, nausea, vomiting, but more specifically, electrical shocks through the torso, which is now defined as buffeting. Okay? Now, these individuals are truly being tortured and affected 365 days a year, 24/7. It is completely debilitating. And what Dr. Hall was doing was utilizing a general frequency detector, scanning people to see if they can detect anything around their person. And they were coming up positive. And I had said to him, well, isn't that enough to go to the general practitioner and get further diagnostics? He says, no. As soon as they go and they say they hear auditory symptoms, he says they're being forced institutionalized and forced medicated. And he says they're being re-victimized. And I said, well, my background as a firefighter paramedic and being involved in IRBs and studies and looking for objectivity, I said, well, there's got to be a way to take this subjective complaints and turn it into objective data. So that's when I decided to call that meeting in Sacramento, California. When 100 people showed up, I said, we have something. So I decided to start doing mass scanning in the field in conjunction with obtaining survey data to see who was most affected by this. And the data started to paint a picture. 300 people showed up at our first event in Davis, California. And what the data was showing is the persons most affected by this during that time were Caucasian females, recently single, widowed, or divorced, highly educated, then Caucasian males, in the same sequence, African Americans, Asians, and then Hispanics. And it dwindled down in ethnicity from there. And I go, is this some type of attack on Caucasians? Because we went to the Midwest and the same exact data happened, same picture. It did change when we got into Chicago, where African American and Caucasian flipped, where African Americans became number one and Caucasians were number two. And that stayed consistent to the East Coast, except for one anomaly, which was up in Virginia. I was invited by a bunch of military subcontractors who were all having these same complaints. And they found out about my work and they said, can you please come and scan us? That ultimately took me to Europe. I was invited by a government agency to test their diplomats. And for me to bring anyone who I felt sure was suffering from this phenomenon. They allowed me to use a research facility, test these individuals in a Faraday cage, anechoic chamber, which is a robust Faraday cage, and it was rated to block out frequencies between 8 kilohertz and 19 gigahertz. The frequencies we were detecting out in the field were well within that. So we used controlled people, which our frequency counters read 0 for the first time ever. So we knew we were in the right environment. When we brought in those symptomatic individuals, we were detecting frequencies. So it was at that point we conclude, for whatever reason, these frequencies are emitting from the human body. Ultimately, that led to the Bonnie Kellerby cases where they started doing surgical removals, finding these biosensors. Now, in 2016, which is far further, in the future, from 2010, it was recognized, but from our diplomats and our FBI agents and CIA agents and congressional members, Colonel Eggering testified that this is happening to all of them, but they're saying it only happens to federal employees. We know for a fact that this has been happening, at least we've been documenting since 2010, to U.S. citizens here in the United States. Why else would the head doctor of a three-letter agency contact me and tell me, you and Dr. Hall kind of Renaissance men, and you're absolutely correct. There's significant overlap between the 338 federal employees that he's treating for Havana syndrome and our clients are the same. He said, the only difference is that you are surgically removing biosensors. Tell me more.
So